Hey, Coach Arns here, another edition of the Right to Bear Arms. I have a special guest today. This is the first time we've had a guest on the Right to Bear Arms show. So I wanted to bring in my son, Christian Arnsparger. Christian, come on and have a seat.
Hey, Daddy.
Good to see you today. Christian is an amateur historian and an expert, self-proclaimed and otherwise, in colonial American history. So Christian, we've been talking in my class.
Self-proclaimed.
Self-proclaimed. We've been talking in my class about the Enlightenment Period. We're talking about the Enlightenment and how it affected our colonial period and the development of the United States of America. So we've talked about when the colonies first started and people came over from England and went through the 1600s. The colonies grew, and the king and Parliament had a little bit to do with the colonies during the mid-1600s. Navigation Acts. And then they kind of took a hands-off approach with King and Queen, the Glorious Revolution.
William and Mary came in and kind of began era of salutary neglect, which is lax control of the colonies and didn't have much interference. And so, the colonies prospered in their self-government and, which were very much influenced by the Enlightenment theories and Enlightenment thinkers.
Yeah, a lot of Enlightenment thought went into these people that came to the colonies. They were real self-starters, so they had that kind of Enlightenment sense of self. And then came a war, French and Indian War, 1753. All right, and with that war, it was us. We were the colonists of Britain against the French and the Indians. Went well for us. And then tell us a little bit about the result of that war after we won that war.
Well, obviously we put in the major fighting force in the war. So, we basically fought the war for Britain, and then
basically we were saying that they didn't bring a lot of their own soldiers here from Britain. We did the fighting.
Right, we did all the fighting. Even though it's called the British, we were part of Britain. So,
right.
When the war ended and the Treaty and Proclamation of 1763, Proclamation came shortly after, but it basically said that all of this land that we've been fighting for against the Indians and the French, the westward expansion and all of our kind of desires west, we could not pursue those, and they cut us a line, the Proclamation Line, which is basically the Appalachian Mountain. And the whole war that we fought over that land, now they say we can't do it because we don't want you wasting any more of our money, and then they began taxing us to make up for all the debts that they accumulated over the war.
And we knew something about the Enlightenment period. We knew something about self-government and things like that. And how did us colonists feel about things like the Stamp Act and the tea tax?
Well, obviously we hated it. It was awful.
It was pretty bad because we had taxation
without representation.
We didn't have representation, and so obviously that ended the period of what you call
salutary neglect.
And led into a period of time where us colonials did not like the king very much, did not like Parliament, and at that point we decided to. We had some independence movements going on. 1774, we did something very Enlightenment by creating a
first constitutional convention.
There you go, the Continental Congress the first Continental Congress, 1774, representative, a form of representative government, self-government, very Enlightenment type thing. I'm sure Locke would have approved, and Montesquieu would have been quite happy with that. And then the British decided to start the war, right? 1775. We always called it the shot heard around the world.
Lexington and Concord.
There you go, Lexington and Concord. We figured out that, hey, we had the right to self-defense.
That's right. We'd take up some arms and fight for our right of self-government.
That's right. So that was a great thing. We love the Second Amendment, so we always love that. We always love that part of the story there. Here on the Right to Bear Arms, we love the Second Amendment. All right, so then we decided to send a letter to the king, and we call that letter the Declaration of Independence.
Best letter ever written.
Best letter, written by Thomas Jefferson. Rap nickname?
TJ.
TJ. Tell us a little bit about that with how it deals with the Enlightenment.
Well, TJ, obviously, if you read it, you can, see direct comparisons between his words and the words of John Locke in the two treatises and any other of his writings, and which emphasized the individual's right of life, liberty, and Thomas Jefferson's interpretation was the pursuit of happiness. So, all of those, huge Enlightenment ideas were being put directly into words written and sent to the king, saying that we have the right of all of these and we should be given it.
Wonderful Enlightenment document. Then we had to fight a war. George Washington gets up an army, loses a few more.
Quite a lot.
Yeah. And let's talk about the three kinds of people there were in our country when our revolution first started. There's three types of people. Yeah, John Adams, he talked about it first. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, John Adams very famously said that we had three very distinct people in our colonies. We had the Patriots, who fought very strongly for the right of independence and the cause, and we had the Loyalists, who were still loyal to Britain and to the King, who still, maybe not have fought for them, but who still supported them. And then we had who my dad likes to call the fence sitters, who were sitting on the fence between the two and didn't have any particular care. They didn't care.
Yeah, so I suppose we Americans have always been separated into three groups like that in some form or fashion. George Washington, Christmas 1776, after losing a bunch of wars, he decided to go attack the Hessians in Trenton. How'd that go for us?
Went very well, one of our first biggest wins, and it convinced a lot of the fence sitters to we won them over to the cause of independence, and they started fighting for us and believing in that.
Very good. And I would, believing in the revolution, and from my standpoint, believing in Enlightenment. Yeah, sure. All right, let's talk about another group of enlightened people, the French.
Okay.
I don't like to tell you, I'm not big on the French, but they did help us out. We won some battles in Saratoga, New York, and then the French decided.
French thought that, might as well help these little colonies. We hate the British, so.
Sure. And you gotta still like the Marquis de Lafayette. As much as I'm not crazy about the French and their government,
Lafayette is great.
You still gotta like the Marquis de Lafayette.
He gave his own private funds to the cause of independence.
Yeah, he was only like 23 when he was a general for help George Washington out.
Then got his way back to France and played a huge part in the French Revolution.
The French Revolution. We'll talk about that next week. I'll talk about that with my class next week. So the Enlightenment was rolling with our independence movement, with our war, and we won the war. 1781. 1781. Yorktown.
Yeah, Yorktown.
All right, tell me.
The surrender of Yorktown, the British surrendered to us because our troops were already fighting with the British, and we kind of pushed them back towards the sea at Yorktown, and the French had their ships and armies waiting there, and the British couldn't fight us both, so they just surrendered, and we won the war.
Cornwallis surrendered. Okay, so after that, we had to start a country for real.
Yep.
We had
get down to business.
Yep. We our first national government, Articles of Confederation.
Not the best, I must say.
Yeah, I know you're not a big fan of the old Articles. Weak national government, strong state governments. We could go on and on for hours talking about the difficulties they had. But our founding fathers, as smart as they were, decided that
it didn't work very well.
Yeah, and
we needed something new.
Something better, with a stronger national government.
So they started drafting the Constitution.
Here we go. Ratified 1788. 88, became our new government. Big time Enlightenment philosophy in the Constitution. The biggest. Self-government, ways of self-government. We talk about them all the time. And one of the things I know is every student that I've got knows the three branches of government.
That's good, they better.
Yeah, executive, legislative, and judicial. Big time in the Constitution. Separation of powers. You also had, and then, of course, you had to have a protection of individual liberties. And that came with the first 10 amendments. We call that
Bill of Rights.
The Bill of Rights. Got to love the Bill of Rights. Very enlightened document. We talked last week about Voltaire. Voltaire was real big in the basic freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, or freedom of religious worship. So anyway, when you talk about the American, our Declaration of Independence, our starting of our new country, and our new government, everything very much
very heavily influenced by the
Enlightenment period. Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. What was his nickname again? Forgot that.
TJ.
That was his rap nickname. What was his? He had another nickname.
Oh, Mr. Age of Enlightenment.
Mr. Age of Enlightenment, right? A lot of founding fathers knew a lot about all of the Enlightenment, American Revolution, Great Revolution. Of course, we're here because of it.
That's right.
And we are all children of the Enlightenment, children of our own revolution, still in that great experiment of democracy.
And so far, it's proven to be a huge success.
Okay. Well, Christian, I'd like to thank you for joining me on the Right to Bear Arms today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure everybody else would echo that this has been a wonderful learning experience. And good luck to you also in your pursuits of greatness in the history field.
Thank you.
Good to be glad you're here.
Yep.